I'm going to tie a BBQ Dry Fly, and the BBQ stands for brown basic quill, but these could really be any different color variations. And I'm sure there's a lot of very similar patterns out there, so may not be that original. I'm starting off with a size 12 dry fly hook and the vise, and the thread that I'm going to use is an 8/0, and this is a dark brown. And I'll start this at the front of the hook shank and take enough wraps to get it locked in. And then I'm going to add in my upright wing, and for that I'm going to use a turkey flat, and this is a natural turkey flat, not dyed. And I'll bunch this up. All that I'm worried about is the tips being together, really. And I'll measure this out. I want it to be a little bit longer than the gape in the hook, so that's where I'll tie it in. Take a couple of turns here, and then when I'm happy and convinced it's not going anywhere, I'll take an angled cut back and finish wrapping that in. I'll come in front of the upright wing and take some wraps to build a thread dam to keep it up, and then I'll bring my thread back to the end of the taper there. The tail that I'll use is from just hackle fibers, and this is going to be the color hackle that I'm going to strip back to make my quill as well. So remove a handful of fibers and then keep that feather handy, because we'll strip that down for the quill. I'll measure this out to be about a hook shank in length, and I'll tie it in where my other material ended to help work on that taper. When I've got it again nice and tied in, I'll come back and trim. So now I'll take this hackle feather, and I'm going to strip down all the fibers here so that it just leaves the stem, and that's going to be the material that I use for my quill. One thing that you can do, and I've actually done with this in advance, is soak it in water. Sometimes it helps it be a little bit more pliable. So I had some setting in a little bit of water for a bit just to help loosen it up. And if you want it to have a more prominent brown color, you can see when you strip it, it's got brown on one side, but then there'll be flavors of white as well. If you want it to be more brown or a different shade of color, you can always take a Sharpie to it. So I'm going to tie this in with the thin part or the stem tip first, and so that way I have an increasingly segmented body. And then I'll take this side by side wraps, and as you get to more of the meaty part of the stem, the segments will increase a bit. And so I'll wrap this up to my thread and then tie it off. And again, if you wanted it to be more brown, you can just run a Sharpie through it. And then I'll clip that. Now I can tie in my hackle, and for that I'm going to use a furnace hackle, and this has already been sized for the fly. I'll trim it so that I have a stem to tie in. Take a couple wraps behind and in front, and I'll leave my thread behind the eye of the hook where I have enough room to eventually tie it off. So now I can wrap my hackle forward, take maybe 2 or 3 wraps behind the upright wing, I'll hold it back, and I'll do the same in front. And when I get to my thread, then tie it off and trim. Now I can build out a little thread head here, and a whip finish. and then trim the excess thread. If you'd like, you can put a drop of head cement then on the thread head, and if you'd like to, you can put some on that quill body. But that is my barbecue dry fly.